It is time for us to check in with Amanda Lang, host of Taking Stock, which airs Friday evening at 6 p.m. on Bloomberg and, of course, on the iHeart Radio network as well. Amanda, I guess the place to start today is on a story, yet again, where people are shaking their heads wondering what exactly the government is doing, or maybe I should say isn't doing as far as work. A record for government outsourcing, even as the civil service grows. What's this about?
Yeah, it's interesting. We've been hearing these stories about contracts going to McKinsey. That's the giant global consulting firm. And, of course, that kind of is a bit of a lightning rod. But in general, what the Parliamentary Budget Office has found, and this is a report that they just put out yesterday, and it's something they do kind of preparing for the budget. So it's kind of a state of play of how the finances are doing. And they note that we're running above $21 billion in so-called professional and special services. That's outsourcing. And the PBO, they take a kind of straight down the line stance on these things, but they sort of also note that meanwhile the public sector has grown during pandemic to a record level. So it does kind of raise this question of why are you growing your internal staff and also doing a record amount of outsourcing?
I wonder, it's obviously that's a lot of money, certainly coming off the McKinsey story, people wondering why have we always been spending this kind of money? Are we at record levels on this? Have we ever seen this kind of money spent on outsourcing before?
We never have, and to be fair, in terms of why it's a story, not is it only a story because the public sector has gotten so large, but this happens to be a federal government that campaigned against outsourcing. So they're kind of stuck in a corner of their own making. Back in 2015, Justin Trudeau said he would reduce the amount of outsourcing, and instead we've gone from what used to be in the range of kind of $20 billion to way above that. So it's up by a third, according to the PBO, in that same period. So rather than reducing it, we've gone to record levels, and it's numbers that are a bit eye-popping. Like when you get up into kind of $20 billion here, that's a big spend, right? That represents a sizable chunk of government budgeting, and you just come back to now maybe it's really well spent. We don't know, and that's sort of what the PBO is raising is how do you measure the value of this? How do you know whether you're getting good return? We don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, and you have an exclusive interview coming up, right, with the competition commissioner.
We are talking to Matthew Boswell today, and of course, this is a government agency that has been clamoring for change to the laws around competition. And as we know, he very publicly took on the Rogers-Shaw merger and lost. The Competition Tribunal said that merger will go through. But changes to the Competition Act are on the way. He would like, I think, even more changes than might come. He thinks we don't have the teeth that we need in this country to make sure that consumers are well served. The way we measure competition and concentration is a little bit old school, and it may be out of step with other countries.
Interesting. Okay, well, speaking of other countries, we just got the results of a 4-day workweek study done in the UK, and it looks pretty good. So I feel like we've been talking about this forever and ever. Now it actually seems feasible because productivity did not go down, but just because it worked there, Amanda, can it work here?
It's really important, and what a great day of the week to be talking about it.
Right.
This might be the day that you didn't have to go to work. The way that they did it is companies could choose whether it was a 4-day work week or whether it was just a compressed week. In other words, you could have just a shorter number of hours every day, and even you could compress it by time. So if you've got a busy period, everybody works full tilt, but then you go really slow in other times of the year. And what they did find, because the big question has always been, well, what happens to your sales and your productivity, and the company falls apart? And the answer is a hearty no. Sales hold steady, productivity goes way up. Unshocking, workers are happier. Their work-life balance is better. Their psychological health is better. So there's a lot of interest in this. And, we know post-pandemic, people want to work from home. This is one way to kind of start to make the case that at least part of the time in some jobs, not for all jobs, you can have a little more flexibility in mind when you're kind of designing what the workplace looks like.
Is it sustainable, though? Like, I can't help but think, yes, during a pilot project, everyone's going to be super enthusiastic and working their butts off to try and make those numbers look good so we can have a 4-day work week. But in the long term, will it continue to work?
It's a really good question. I would say there's a lot of data out there that when an employee is balanced, in other words, when they're not stressed out in other parts of their life, they actually do bring their better self to work. So there's a case to be made that when you actually take care of the whole person, you're going to get a better job out of them. And again, this will differ from one, if you work on a production line, it's pretty hard to step out. Somebody has to be there. But we could change our thinking about how and when and why we work. And, we only have to acknowledge that the way we've structured our workplaces really comes right out of the 19th century industrial era. Like, we could do better. We can actually update our thinking. So I'm glad to see them do this kind of thing and that the results are sort of positive. I think you're right. There'll be a little bit of caution around it because it was short term. People did know that they were being watched. But I think there's lots here to kind of be optimistic about.
I can't help but think whenever there are studies like these that there's an ulterior motive to the people reporting the results who would love to have a 4-day work week. Mm-hmm. But that aside, I wonder too in this case, it's one thing to suggest in a smaller company this could work. Are big companies, do you think, as open to this idea as well?
Some of the companies involved in this study, there were 61 companies in total, up almost 3,000 employees. They ranged in size, and so big companies were involved. I think you're hitting on an important point, which is because there will be some natural inequity around this, some jobs will work for it and others simply won't. It may get harder in a big company because you'll feel, the culture is kind of affected if people can't be back. I think that's partly, we might agree, what's driving the drive to return to office, which is, it's seen as a bit of a perk of some jobs that you can do your job from home. And the folks that can't are kind of put out by that. Why do I have to show up to the office? And so they kind of want to drag everyone back with them. I think what we might land on is a better way to compensate the people who have to show up physically rather than making everybody do it unnecessarily.
Right.
I'm just thinking, too, with employment numbers being what they are, employees are still in a very interesting position in terms of being able to negotiate things.
You would think so, and I hope so, because again, we haven't really done a good rethink of this, and some of this stuff used to be the sole domain of upper management, or, if you were very senior, partner in a law firm, you could work from wherever you wanted, and now those junior players are saying, we want some of that, and by the way, everybody will benefit. So I think a little bit more information, a little bit more thought around it is all good.
Last thing before we run out of time, numbers today, surprising, I think, fair to say, even though they're out of the U.S., consumer confidence rising to a 13-month high, so much for inflation, and new home sales soaring in January. My question, I guess, Amanda, is that's out of the U.S. What does this portend for us? Is there spillover effect to be felt here, do you think?
Really interesting, and there may be, because we think some of that was driven by the stock market. It did much better than it had last year, and people felt better as a consequence. I will say this, and I hate to be a downer, but this is a case where good news is bad news, because if you're a central bank, you actually don't want these numbers right now. You want people to be feeling scared and gloomy, and you want them to spend appropriately. So when we're feeling great and like nothing bad is going to happen and we're going to go buy that house today, the central bank says, oh, we're not done yet, and so rates may go up further. That's certainly how we can interpret the U.S. data. That central bank is likely going to have to keep raising. I don't know that we're going to follow here. I think we're in a slightly more sensible place in Canada. I hope so. But again, a little confidence is always good. Too much would be bad news.
Amanda Lang. Amanda, thank you so much. Have a great weekend.
You too.